Welcome to Game Theorem, where we have serious discussions about absurd entertainment.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Kira.
And so, listeners, you all know how we normally begin our episodes. Whenever we do a deep dive or a revisit on a particular series, usually a video game one, but it doesn't have to be, we'll start off with a quote from a character in that series to kind of lay the ground for the episode. But on wide look episodes like this one, where we're discussing a trend or topic or something that might be culturally relevant to the media or entertainment, we like to show a little skit that we will come up with to show how ridiculous or important the thing that we're talking about is. Right? We're not doing that this episode. Honestly, I'm a little nervous about this episode.
Why?
Because what we're talking about is actually, it's a quite serious thing. Okay, so listeners, if you don't know, we usually end up planning our episodes a month in advance. Ever since we came up with the idea of doing episodes once every 2 weeks, which for the record has been a lifesaver. We used to be busy all the time, had no free time because we were always doing podcasts on a weekly basis. Giving an extra week gives us so much breather room, and now we have no free time for other reasons. And so it gives us a lot more time with the podcast and whatnot, and that's been great, but it means our output is slower. You know, by the time we record the podcast, it's going to be 2 weeks before you hear it. By the time we start researching, it's going to be 4 weeks, a whole month. We came up with the idea of doing this episode, an episode basically on the concept of cancel culture. And we came up with the idea at a time where no one was really talking about it. Like,
we only came up with it because of things that had happened recently in the gaming industry.
Right. I mean, there were a few particular events that stood out to us, and we updated our notes as we went along. But it was the kind of thing that we didn't really know of any good, like, dissertations on the subject. You'd either just have people going, this is ridiculous, or this is important. You know what I mean? So we were like, you know what? Let's do that. I think we can do that. You know, you thought so as well, Kira. And by the time we got around to actually doing it, because of the month delay, there's several dissertations now, because again, something big happened in the news where everyone started talking about it. I don't even want to get into that because we were already planning on doing this. And I don't mean to suggest all the time that we plan on doing an idea and then something happens, because we have brought that up a few times before. But I think really what it is just a lot of people are kind of having the same ideas around the same time, and we're always late to the party.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put that out there. I also think it's important to mention that this is probably one of our more overtly political discussions. We normally don't really delve that deep into politics. It's just, you know, all media is politics. So it ends up, you'll see it, especially on that Papers, Please episode. That was a big one.
Yep.
But we're not going to make any overt discussions of like left versus right, you know, of the American political spectrum. Like, you don't plan on doing that, do you, Kira?
No.
Right. So if you're worried about that, forget it.
We're talking about society and culture mostly.
And if that happens to map onto a left or right or middle, so be it.
Yep.
I do want to point out, though, that what we're going to be talking about with cancel culture is it's very problematic. Even talking about it as a thing that is real is inherently a problematic thing. But when people talk about cancel culture, there's a lot of different nuances to what they are talking about, because the term doesn't have an exactly great consensus on a definition. And a lot of people will tell you that the term is just outright fake, that there is no actual cancel culture.
Which we'll get into.
Right. Kira did most of the research for this episode, so I'm doing this at the risk of pre-explaining things you're going to explain.
It's fine. We'll go more in depth later on.
I just thought it was good to bring this up at the top of the podcast episode. And I figured I should also mention that we might later distinguish between cancel culture and more of like a Twitter culture. In light of those dissertations we talked about, if you want to see any dissertation of the subject, I would really recommend one that's done by this other YouTube channel called Some More News. It's called Cancel Culture Isn't a Thing. Mm-hmm. And the guy goes really into it, but at a bit of a narrower topic than I think we're going to discuss, because he doesn't really talk about the Twitter culture aspect of it.
Yeah, which we are definitely going to discuss.
All right, so I got my preamble out of the way, and yeah, so if you think cancel culture just isn't a thing to begin with, which I'm going to be honest with you, fair. Just please humor us for this episode, because we think it's an important topic that affects the entertainment industry that we really should talk about.
And I'm going to say, yes, cancel culture may not be a thing in the way that certain people say it is, but there is a thing of like the internet mob and public shaming that you can't deny exists.
Which kind of get conflated.
Yes, exactly. They really get conflated.
And even if it's not a thing, it's a thing that's believed by people to be a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like Harry Potter isn't real, but there's a character, a fictional character called Harry Potter. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of thing we're talking about.
All right, so we're going to start off by defining what it is.
Okay.
And props to AOC for this, but the definition of cancel culture...
Actually, no, she wasn't the one who said it. No, it was someone else.
Really?
Yeah, she reported on it, and it was someone else who said it. I don't remember, so...
Okay. Well, cancel culture was formerly known as consequences, to be honest. So, yeah, we'll get into that. All right. Usually it's a term used by people who think things are going too far. They'll call it cancel culture and they'll say it's going too far.
For record, that's a red flag. If anyone ever says going too far, you need to explain what that means. Because if you don't explain what it means, you might as well just be saying thing bad.
Exactly.
Because you're not really explaining what going too far means. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not even that hard. You can come up with any reason.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nuanced discussion, especially when you're like... There are several different ways to say going too far. You could be saying that, oh, I think people care too much about what people say and that they should be more forgiving, which is nebulous and pretty bad thing to say, I guess, depending on what was said.
But it's at least more explained than just saying 2 words too far.
Yeah, I know. But you could also be saying it in a genuine way where you feel like the culture on Twitter of like public shaming and the internet mob is causing people to be depressed and maybe even kill themselves. And in that way, you could be saying that, oh, it's going too far because it's driving these people to those extremes.
I would just like to add in postscript, though, heavy quotations around the phrase internet mob.
Yeah. All right. So even if the term cancel culture itself is used in bad faith, there is a phenomenon that it's supposed to refer to. And it's basically consequences for actions like not getting into a college because of something you said, or being canceled from a show or event because of something you said, or even just the Twitter culture of being called out and having a lot of people bully you for something you've said.
Yes, I just think there's an important distinction to make. When people talk about cancel culture, a lot of them are talking about, X famous person got canceled. Their life is ruined. They can't work anymore.
Which is something that never happens, which I was about to bring up.
Right, because they might lose that one job. Or temporarily, but usually their career is fine.
Mm-hmm. Could I bring up something else, though, before we move on?
Oh, sure. Sorry. Was I jumping ahead?
Yes.
Sorry.
All right. So in this definition of cancel culture, there is something that is not cancel culture, but it's something that we definitely want to talk about, which is that Twitter culture that we talked about. Because I'm going to bring up something really serious right now.
I should, just for the record, Twitter being a social media where you can do limited number of characters to put messages and whatnot. Okay, sorry.
All right.
And Twitter is just, I think, the big one, but this can happen on any social media. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
I want to bring up a specific instance that got us talking about this is the creator or someone who worked on this indie game called Night in the Woods. The creator or someone who worked on this game called Night in the Woods. Now, obviously, I don't know every detail about this because I'm saying it as a nebulous thing that I heard about, but it's important that I bring it up.
Oh, but you don't want to condemn him and
No, for reasons that I will bring up momentarily.
Sorry.
So they were accused of assault, specifically sexual assault, I believe. And I heard that they ended up killing themselves. And that was a decision they made on their own. Although I will admit that the Twitter culture of them probably having a mob of people bullying them and saying awful things about them may have contributed to that. They still needed to face consequences for their actions, and I'm just going to say that that is a thing that happened. His decision to kill himself should not be associated with, at all, the allegations against him. Because, yes, it's possible that things may have driven him there, but it is not fair to say that those allegations should not have been brought against him because of the result.
Right, and it's unfortunate that some people would make that point. That, oh, well, you should have all kept your mouth shut and maybe he would still be alive. Well, he would still be a horrible criminal if he was still alive. It doesn't mean he should... I keep saying he. Well, let's be honest, it's obviously going to be a man.
Yes, it was, from what I know.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, it's not like that anyone wanted him to die. I think really, rehabilitation should always be an option, and it's really barely ever discussed.
I just wanted to bring this up because this and someone else will bring up later on are reasons why we decided to talk about this. And I also wanted to say that if I got any details about that story wrong, please let me know. That's just what I know about it.
Okay.
All right.
You want to maybe say the game that this person was involved with?
I did. Night in the Woods.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
it's an indie game.
I missed that.
But
which was apparently a really good game. So that's why this news is so horrible, because this is, tangled and complicated. Good game, bad creator, and then internet reaction, creator dead.
Yeah, it's a crazy situation.
Right. So that's why I can't bring myself to be like what some people call cancel culture to be completely fake.
Exactly.
Which is why it's important to distinguish between actual cancel culture and Twitter culture.
Exactly. And I wanted
because the guy wasn't canceled. He made money off his game. He did not experience a cancel culture. Now, it may have been that his career might have been set back, right? But it's not like his life was ruined. He made a successful game. That's leagues more than what most people would ever get.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up. If any of the details are wrong, just please let me know what you've heard about it. I would like to know. I didn't look into the specifics of the story because I'm not sure I would have been able to handle it.
I read some of the accounts from some of the women. It was hard to... I didn't do all of it.
Are you sure it's about this guy specifically? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on. All right. So the reason Kyle was saying about distinguishing between cancel culture is because a lot of people use it to refer to something that doesn't actually happen, where someone's entire career is ruined for being or saying something problematic. And the truth is, no one has ever lost their entire career, even if they say blatantly racist things or regularly assault women, and they're outed for it.
I mean, I don't want to name drop too many people, especially if I want to try to refrain from the political spectrum like we talked about. But this is someone we brought up in our Death of the Author podcast, which I think is one of our underrated episodes, to be honest. There's that Louis guy. Right? That comedian. We brought him up in that episode. It's the only reason why I'm bringing him up again. And he still has, he's still well off, and he's still trying to come back in, right?
Exactly.
Now, sorry, what?
Now, I will say that the only person you could say probably has had their entire life ruined is people who have literally gone to jail,
Oh,
like
you mean
Bill Cosby.
the one person?
Yeah. But
And
there's an intersection of race there because if a white woman says that they were assaulted by a black man, they're way more likely to be believed. And they're way more likely to see consequences come out of that.
right. And the solution there is not that he specifically shouldn't have received consequences, because he was certainly guilty, but that other people maybe should as well.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
And
saying
then-
that
and
he
even-
shouldn't have been the only one to go to jail over.
But here's the thing. That's not cancel culture, because those were actually crimes they committed. Being punished by the law is not cancel culture. That's just law and order and justice.
Yeah, people would say that, things like just saying something problematic or whatever will get you canceled, and it's ridiculous to say that.
It's honestly surprising that the other guy I mentioned isn't in jail. And the only reason he's not is because the laws in our current society on what constitutes assault are really grossly inadequate.
Can I continue now?
Yeah.
All right, so
Sorry.
first thing is that even if they say those things and do those things, like, no one is entitled to huge opportunities. So people losing these opportunities just because they were racist or sexist is not a big deal. Like, yeah, they should lose those opportunities because they said something like that, because that's not okay. And ultimately, they're gonna be fine if they lose one opportunity because of it.
Oh, you know what? I have a good example of that.
Yeah?
Do you know Sarah Silverman?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know her, she was a famous comedian. I mean, she still is. But she voiced Vanellope on Wreck-It Ralph.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, she did blackface once.
Oh, really?
Yes. And she's come out and apologized for it. She's very sorry about it, acknowledging that it was a wrong thing to do. Now, I don't know, when it comes to, I feel like I could get so into this. There are a lot of people that have unfortunately done that, and even getting a good apology is hard.
Yeah, which is ridiculous, because
But-
that should be the bare minimum, is a genuine good apology.
And if you do get a good apology, I mean, some people still think that's not enough. I think it's a starting point. Now, unlike the some other people that it gets found out from like their high school yearbooks, she did it like on air, and no one seemed to care at the time, because this was long before our current more welcoming day and age, right? Anyway, she lost a job because of that. She was turned down for a gig. It actually did affect her career.
But then she came back and voiced Vanellope for Wreck-It Ralph too, didn't she?
Exactly. And the
Exactly.
first one, like her career was fine. A gig was canceled. Nothing more.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let me continue. I will admit that, yes.
Actually, I should say a gig wasn't canceled. They just hired someone else instead of her. My bad.
So I wanted to say that people who often say this are saying that people are too, like, more willing to cancel people over things they say than in the past. And I wanted to explain that, yes, more things are considered not okay than in the past, but that's how time and society works. Culture progresses and we realize, oh, wait, that's actually wrong.
Yeah, pick
See,
any
slavery.
right, yeah. Pick any arbitrary date, and you're gonna find out they did things that we don't think are okay now.
Exactly.
And I mean, to be fair, there are a few things that they did that might have actually been okay, but we don't think is okay now. You know, we have like a lot of puritanical stuff kind of in our society right now. There might be things that we say are bad that other people may not have found. Like, I'm just saying, like, slavery was obviously a bad thing they allowed, but there might have actually been good things at different points in time that we don't do anymore.
Oh yeah, like in the American West, how they allow like women ran the towns and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that was a very short-lived but good example.
Yeah. All right. So I also wanted to move on and say that the social consequences of people being canceled are often the only consequences that assaulters and racist people will face if they are even famous enough to face those consequences.
I actually think you're being too narrow in that example.
Oh, yes?
It's facing consequences in the form of social pressure and people in the world that can access you via social media like Twitter is sometimes the only consequence you get for doing something that is legal but bad. It doesn't have to just be offensive stuff, because we're thinking of the entertainment industry, but in all industries, you know? People going after the industrial giants that are like ruining the planet. They're doing what they're ruining the planet legally. Everything they're doing will never see justice from it. So if one of them dies and a bunch of people are going around dancing on their grave, I admit it's tacky. But it's also the only form of justice that person would have ever received in their life, except, oh no, they didn't even get that because they had died.
Exactly. All right. The helplessness people feel in that kind of situation where they know that these people won't face consequences is part of the reason why these social consequences are so popular. Because we know that they won't face anything, so the only thing we can do is yell at them on Twitter, you know? And that's just a huge motivator for this cancel culture, for canceling someone. And stuff, because it's just like, well, I personally know that they're never going to face consequences, so I want to feel in control, so I am personally going to say that, no, I'm not going to watch any of the content this person produces anymore. I'm going to unfollow them and block them on all social media, and I will have nothing to do with them from now on because of what they did.
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, we've talked about in our Death of the Author podcast about choosing to not watch problematic content. But I feel like that's not even part of this discussion. No one goes like, oh, cancel culture and my numbers are down. They just go, oh, cancel culture, people are saying mean things to me.
Yeah, well, even saying mean things to someone is literally just like, that is the only bad thing you will ever have to deal with from being so awful. So, you know, it's the only consequence they get.
I think it is important to note, though, that online toxicity and hate... Oh, we're going to get to that, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. We'll get to that.
All right, so I will admit that there needs to be room for nuanced discussion of things and criticism without people like canceling everything and freaking out and saying that you're not allowed to like that thing anymore.
Right. Okay, so this is where I want to bring it up. Like, online harassment and toxicity is a very real issue. And there's people that have to deal with it all the time, regardless of whether they actually do anything wrong. If you're a woman on the internet and you're out and proud as a woman, you're probably going to already have known this.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I mean, even on the stuff we've done together, I remember when we first started doing like our Fallout YouTube series together, I thought we have a woman voice. People like that you know, yay, right? That's going to be great, right? No, because it's the thing where if you sound like because I had a very male demographic on my YouTube channel, right? And I thought that you might maybe appeal to them. No, everyone had a criticism. Everyone didn't like something about your voice. And I never got criticism like that. You know, no one ever says with my voice. I mean, maybe I have an amazing voice. I don't know, but I don't think it's that great.
I think it's great.
I mean, thank you, but I think your voice is great, and you still get criticism, and that's something you learn to move on with. I've never had to do that. I've never had to be like, well, maybe my voice is pretty good, but I get some criticism. Some of it may be founded, some of it may not be. I've never had to go into that, ever. Because I'm a man.
Yep.
Anyway, where was I going with this? Online toxicity and hate, right? I think it's also important to mention that with a lot of things that you call out, like, you know, whether it's racism, bigotry, sexism, all that, if you do it unearnestly or in bad faith, it's actually doing a disservice. Like, there's an argument to be made that if you call someone who is most certainly and factually not anti-Semitic, that you are being anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Because you are devaluing the power of that word by incorrectly using it. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're doing it in bad faith and you know you're doing that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's like that, like a cartoon where you have a character and then another character transforms to look exactly like them. Right? Mm-hmm. Then you have a situation where both characters are saying, oh, I'm the real one, they're the fake one. Even though one of them is factually the real one and one of them is factually the fake one. If you just go in and like, well, both sides have their points. Mm-hmm. You are factually wrong now because there was a right answer and a wrong answer.
Yep, that's true.
So if you're going around canceling anything and everything and you're doing it in bad faith, then you're kind of contributing to that Twitter culture we talked about. This can be especially important for people because everyone's problematic to a certain extent. If someone messes up and you cancel them without allowing for nuance, and I think this is important, a process for rehabilitation. Mm-hmm. It should be possible for anyone to apologize and possibly work to make that up.
I think I mentioned that later on.
Oh, well, I mentioned it now. Sorry. And I think part of what makes this such a problem is Twitter itself. And the way our social media is designed is literally to instigate conflict. Mm-hmm. Like, that's why we have to say Twitter culture. I want to be like, oh, well, all social media. I mean, like, yeah, it's not unique to Twitter. But it's very bad with Twitter because Twitter was designed for this specifically.
Yeah.
Twitter was designed to make cancel culture into a controversy. Mm-hmm. Because Twitter's entire design is you only get a finite number of characters to write like 2 sentences and you send it out in the world. It literally erases nuance. That is what it's designed to do. People actively circumvent this by posting screenshots and pictures of text or linking to other websites.
Or threads.
Or doing threads where they string multiple tweets together. Twitter's not designed to do that. That's people working around the system. Mm-hmm. It actively discourages you from doing that. Mm-hmm. You have to untag people if you don't want to respond directly to someone because they assume you do. Mm-hmm. They assume you want to go after someone. Mm-hmm. So, like, there's no reason for that. Twitter could be just an online social media blog. You could just have unlimited amount of characters. Mm-hmm. And some people might be like, but then I'd have to read. Oh, what? I'm not going to cry about you reading, okay? Mm-hmm. The more nuance, I think, is better. The more discussion, the better. Maybe we wouldn't be so polarized, you know? If there was more understanding because we didn't have to put everything into a bite-sized tweet. I mean, we have a Twitter account. We use it, Game Theorems. Mm-hmm. Look us up on Twitter. But, like, I know how hard it is to say what I want to say in a tweet. I mean, maybe this is coming from someone who's been regularly known in my professional life as someone who types up 5-paragraph emails. But that's because
you write a lot.
There's a lot to say sometimes. Sometimes an issue is very nuanced. I mean, I remember we made a post on like Avengers Endgame, and we had to do the workaround with the screenshots and the pictures and whatnot because we wanted to say like 5 paragraphs. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to say, like, the system is designed to do this. It's not an accident we're here. Twitter is owned by Facebook, right?
I don't know.
I forget, whatever. It's Twitter's bad, and I don't like that we're stuck with it. We try to use it, but honestly, we're bad at it. Mm-hmm. And
I think you're pretty good at it.
No, I'm not. I can just think of witty things to say sometimes, but I never have enough space to do it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so okay, I went on my rant. Your turn.
All right. I was just gonna say that there, especially on Twitter, there is a culture of people who just wait for people to slip up or dig for something and then they will cancel that someone as the second they find something, and even if it's just a nuanced situation where they might not deserve the backlash. And it can be complicated, but basically I'm saying, like, the internet backlash against certain people isn't always warranted.
True, and I think that gets more into public shaming, like you were saying,
Yeah,
than
exactly.
actual cancel culture.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
So
by
maybe
it.
Twitter culture and public shaming are kind of synonyms.
Yeah, but there is definitely that line, like you said, between what people say is cancel culture and actual Twitter
I mean,
culture.
think about the concept of shaming someone. You can publicly shame someone for totally just reasons. You know, if someone was racist, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can also shame someone for completely ridiculous reasons. Like if someone didn't wear that many clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it matter to you how many clothes someone else was wearing?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not directly harmful to you, like how racism perpetuates harmful ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Exactly.
I got too many naked ideas now. I might go out and not wear clothes. Oh my goodness. I mean, if it was consensual, whatever, forget
You
it.
know what? That reminds me of something that I need to bring up at the end.
You want to just bring it up now? Otherwise you'll forget.
It's a tangent. It's only barely related to this.
All right, well, you're going to forget it.
And no, I won't. Anyway, so I just also wanted to say that you are allowed to enjoy problematic media and even people as long as you're aware of it and are
Willing to criticize.
Yeah, willing to criticize. Finding a piece of media that is entirely 100% not problematic is just not going to happen very often, if ever.
But hey, if you have any recommendations, please let us know.
It's fine to enjoy problematic media as long as you acknowledge its faults and aren't afraid to criticize it. Where there's an actual issue of liking media is when there are people who refuse to criticize it and act as if no criticism is valid because it's a masterpiece of its time or various other reasons.
I really feel like that. Like, I know some people use this with like Dragon Ball, for example, which has a lot of problematic things, but let's be honest, it's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. Like, there's some cool stuff going on in Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
I personally really feel this is true for me with Danganronpa, which is why I loved being able to trash talk it on our podcast episodes. But at the same time, I love breaking down the story and going into the characters. Like, I feel there's a lot of good to be had there, but I have to acknowledge the bad.
Yeah, actually, when writing this, I was kind of nebulous. Like, something came up in me because I was like, well, why is it important that you're aware of the bad things? I put that so you don't just let it pass by unnoticed, but like, why do you think it's important to be aware of criticism and bad things about the media you enjoy?
Because it's the perpetuating the harmful ideas. When you see someone that's racist and they don't acknowledge what they're doing is bad, they're perpetuating ideas that are harmful, that create bad stereotypes, that create bigotry. People will ingest this. Now, you might watch a movie and you're not going to be inspired to go murder someone, but the ideas they talked about will be normalized for you. Mm-hmm. If you watch a bunch of horror movies where women get killed, you might think women are prone to being killed.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that's why I think there's room for growth and discussion. If someone does something racist and they realize it's bad, they talk about it, they apologize for it, and they go on to do a whole bunch better stuff. If you look at the whole medium of that person's career, it could be a net good. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about their career and say, oh, they were bad here. Let's be aware of it. Let's make a conscious decision to not perpetuate those harmful ideas. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that might honestly be a controversial statement because a lot of people are like, if you've done something racist, just cancel you forever. There's plenty of people who haven't. And look, fair point. There are plenty of people who haven't. But I think forgiveness is a little underrated.
Yes, I was.
And I mean, I am particularly biased in this regard as someone who used to be a very horrible person. I think you can apply this to media like Danganronpa, for example. I think there's a lot of positive stuff you could take about it, a lot of moving character arcs, and a lot of it's almost like a game about killing that inspires empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even some powerful women characters in it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's many atrocious ones that are stereotypes. There's literally a character who's a stereotype of feminism, who was obviously written by a person who didn't know the first thing about what feminism was.
Yeah.
And I have to acknowledge that. I have to make the conscious choice to not perpetuate the harmful ideas. Now, the media itself, the people who made it, they didn't make that choice. They chose to perpetuate those ideas. It's not like the other example where they apologized for it and tried to go back on it. We as the consumers must make that choice for them. Mm-hmm. And look, if there's a piece of media that does more harm than good, I'm totally for just throwing it in the garbage and moving on. Mm-hmm. But the idea that it has to be 100% pure, like we said, is either not going to happen or it's going to be very hard to happen. Again, give us some suggestions if you know of some really great media.
You were right in that it's up to you personally whether you're able to see past those things and see the good things in media and not let it sour your experience of it.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's up to me personally, like it's each person's decision, each person's interpretation is valid, because I think there is a consensus of the facts here.
Oh, well, yeah, obviously. I'm just saying, like, there is a line where, yeah, you can look past the bad things and enjoy it, like Danganronpa, and there's a line that crosses where it's like, no, this is just distasteful, and I can't enjoy this because of all the rampant misogyny or racism in it.
Right. And of course, different people have different decisions on that. I've heard people that enjoy really problematic content, but that's because they get something out of it.
Uh-huh.
Even though I would say, okay, that's more bad than good.
Mm-hmm.
I would be fine with tossing it, but there's some sentimental attachment they have to it.
Uh-huh.
They just need to understand the facts of the situation, being willing to criticize what's bad with it and be like, okay, I realize there's a lot bad in this. It actually kind of frustrates me sometimes when I talk to people who just don't seem to realize how much toxic ideas are in something and they just completely overlook it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. All right, so let's move on. I was going to bring up that forgiveness thing because people need to be given room to learn and grow. And
you have a lot of examples on your notes here that we haven't talked about. Are we going to bring them up at the end?
Yeah, we can bring it up later. I just wanted to get through the main content.
All right.
So people need to be given room to learn and grow. Just because someone has said something problematic in the past or done something doesn't mean they shouldn't be given the chance to apologize and explain how they've changed since then.
Like me.
Yeah, if it's a genuine apology and they know what they did wrong and why it was wrong, then old tweets or something like that can be forgiven. There is this pressure to be perfect and never be problematic in any way, and perfection in that regard is impossible.
Right. That's basically what I said off the top of my head, but you did in a much more thoughtfully and succinct way. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, sorry for jumping ahead on the gun there.
It's fine. So basically, I'm saying that, like, there's this pressure. There really is this pressure to be perfect, and people just need to be more forgiving, like you said, about these things. Because if there is a genuine apology, like, for example, Sarah Silverman did, even racist things could be like, you're always going to have blind spots. Always. Mm-hmm. From the culture you were born in. You're always going to be unlearning in toxic things. So
that's why the word woke exists, because you were born asleep.
Yeah. You were born in this society and you were born believing all these ideas that everyone else pushed onto you. Only when you grow into your own and you learn about these ideas, that's when you realize that, yeah, I may have done or said some problematic things in the past because I didn't know back then, but I've learned and grown a lot since then.
Right. And it's good to do that, but I think it's more important for people to be willing to accept that.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
if you don't know that people might accept you, you might not apologize. I don't for a second think that there isn't a large group of the population of, let's just say, racists, for example, that might have been willing to come back if they knew there were people that would accept them. And of course, there's going to be many that won't. There would be many that wouldn't be operating in that good faith.
Yeah.
But I think if it's part of that rehabilitation I talked about. And like, look, we talked about some like the law and order and justice system. Our justice system isn't built for rehabilitation. It's built for punishment. So is it a surprise that our social media and our culture and discussion is not centered around rehabilitation, but instead punishment?
Yeah. I didn't make that connection, but you're right. Because a lot of people will say awful things towards people to punish them without realizing that, hey, they might have realized that this was wrong to do and apologize and are better now.
And look, I get it. If there's someone big out there, again, ruining the planet, and they don't ever get any punishment, even giving them that feels like a semblance of justice. But a semblance of justice is not the full thing. We can ask for more. All right. Anything else you wanted to go into?
Being aware of problematic and awful things people have done and things like that in the media is important, but it can admittedly take away your enjoyment of certain things.
I mean, some people say that, but I personally have never felt that way.
Well, let me stop. Let me continue.
Sorry.
All right. So that it doesn't mean that you have to, just because you're aware of these things doesn't mean that you have to stop watching media or stop enjoying people. Naturally, just being aware of bigotry means you start to see it more, and because it's everywhere, you can't help but see it. And when you see bigotry, it just hinders your enjoyment of some things because it bothers you. And it especially sucks when someone you previously enjoyed and liked as a public figure turns out to have been a really bad person and you just didn't know about it because it was hidden.
Right.
And I wanted to stop you there and bring this up because now you can go on about this happening to you. Because I know this happened to you.
Well, now that you mention it, like, it's basically because of what you said that, like, yes, you could still, for example, enjoy Night in the Woods. I would say it's probably unethical to give money to that person. Except now they're not alive anymore, so
that money probably goes to the other people involved with it.
So now I don't even know if I can say that because it's confusing.
Yeah.
But if you really want to still play the game, that's fine. Just be aware of these criticisms. Be willing to criticize. And yeah, now that you mention it, I guess the thing is, I love digging into and analyzing things. That's why we made this podcast together, right? But there have been times where I really did feel like something caught me off guard that I didn't realize. And I think that's the times. I think, maybe this should be a lesson for everyone. If you're worried about media being ruined for you, don't wait for it to happen to you. Go do it to yourself. Get ahead of it. Go actively ruin your own media by looking into it and criticizing it. And then it's never going to be a surprise for you. Because, that's what I did with Danganronpa, for example. And I'm like, I ruined Danganronpa. Still enjoy it, but now I know the problems. On the flip side, I love Weird Al. I like a lot of his music. But there are some of his stuff that's been problematic, and I've been, purging my song list of those problematic songs. I can still like Weird Al because I still think he's done more good than bad. However, like one of his songs, which was one that's been around since my childhood, was Albuquerque. It's his longest song. It's 12 minutes. It's crazy. It's zany. It's fun.
You can literally
I memorized all the words.
Yes, you can literally sit here and do the entire song.
But a friend of ours, we mentioned her in the last podcast, Rose, in the Kirby one we did. No, that was the one before last, whatever. She pointed out to me that the song uses a word that is now treated as a slur for intersex people. I didn't know that. I figured it was a rude word. I never used it outside of context for the song. But now I know that. And this only happened recently, within the last few days.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of come to terms with the decision of, do I remove Albuquerque and never listen to it again? Or do I keep listening to it, knowing that word's in there, perpetuating those ideas, but choose to not acknowledge it?
I think as long as you acknowledge it, it's okay for you to keep the song. Like, it's okay for people to listen to songs with, like, the N-word in them, as long as you don't sing it aloud.
Yeah, but is the N-word said by a white person?
Oh, it depends on the song, but usually if you're listening to rap, it's black artists.
And they have a right to say the N-word, so that's not really the same thing. I don't think that's really comparable.
Oh, because you're saying that Weird Al shouldn't have said that word in his song.
Yeah, it'd be different if Weird Al was an intersex person saying this.
Yeah, I get that. Fair enough.
So I have to make the decision, is there more good than bad in the song? And personally, I don't think there is.
Okay, fine.
So I'm considering removing it from my song list.
All right, that'd be
because as
fine
much
with
as I
me.
thought it was fun and funny and whatnot, that doesn't mean like, oh, there were socially progressive things for intersex people that offset these other things. You know what I mean? I feel it does kind of a net harm. And look, yes, that's a subjective evaluation. I think there can be a consensus of facts, but also subjectivity. So if you chose to listen to that song while actively criticizing it, I could be okay with that maybe. But if you deny that it's harmful, especially when it's told to you, and you know this for a fact, but you just deny it and listen to it anyway, that's what we start talking about with like those like racist famous people, for example. So anyway, that...
You're forgetting about an example that was huge that you went through recently that you're just not talking about.
What?
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Well, I don't really feel like getting into him.
Okay, fine.
I mean, that was so long ago. Didn't I already mention that on a podcast episode?
No, you haven't.
Oh. I mean, I used to love the guy, but he said some really problematic stuff lately. He said some stuff against gun violence, or like that it's a serious issue. He said, he's had 4 allegations from women that he assaulted. So this is my first time going through an incident where someone has been called out on a crime, and they were someone that I liked.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I wanted you to bring it up.
Right. So I feel that's such a negative, and he's not getting any type of justice for it, much less apologizing for it. I'm like, okay, you got to go into the trash bin now.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to cancel you. You still got all your monies.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to contribute to this.
All right. I wanted to talk about an example that's personally affected me.
All right.
Yeah. Jeremy Soule, who composes music for the Elder Scrolls games all the way back to Morrowind, was recently outed as a serial abuser. And I read the entire article about this, and it affected me to the point where I literally can't play the Zelda Scrolls game without replacing the music. I have to replace the music, because if I listen to that iconic music, I can't help but think about all the women he hurt to make this music. Because, like, the story literally says how, he talks all the time about how women are his muses, and about how the relationships he has with women are really important in him being able to compose, and it's really creepy. It makes me feel like every time I listen to one of those songs, how many women did you have to assault to make that music?
I understand why you feel that, and I will support your decision in that regard, particularly because it's easy to replace the music.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a little different. That's when we get more into death of the author kind of territory.
I guess, yeah.
Because it's not like those music, that music that he made has lyrics perpetuating those harmful ideas.
No, but the way that you talked about it in the article, it's like hurting these women directly contributed to him being able to compose.
Right, but those are his words saying that. My point is, if you just listen to the art itself...
I don't doubt that he...
I'm not saying what he's saying is true or false.
Yeah.
My point is those are more just his words and his involvement. Mm-hmm. I think it's possible to appreciate the art itself for what it is. Mm-hmm. I don't blame you for, since you know the context of that you can be uncomfortable with it. I think that's perfectly fine, and you obviously wouldn't want to support him.
Yeah, the woman who came out and talked about literally said that she cannot play Skyrim because...
But I think that's also unfortunate.
Yeah. Because
that person doesn't get art now.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's unfortunate that this happens because art is lost for some people. Mm-hmm. But I also feel if you wanted to play it, if you wanted to play the game with the music, I wouldn't blame you. It's again that concept of recognizing and criticizing. And because it doesn't actually perpetuate those harmful ideas with like lyrics or just propaganda, I feel you have an even stronger case for that.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree with you there.
It's still, knowledge is power. Knowing that is extra context to help you make that decision.
Mm-hmm. And like, I was going to say like, crap.
Can I just talk then? Oh.
As I remember. That story is also a very detailed story of how people in the game industry and in that industry at all are quite abused, especially when you first break into it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so can I talk about 2 more examples that you skipped over in your notes?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, first of all is Game of Thrones, right? Now, if you don't know anything about this, Game of Thrones is a book series. It was then made into a television series, but the longer the TV show went, the further they strayed from the books, until eventually they decided to prematurely end the whole thing, cancel it, if you will, and ended at seven seasons, even though the books naturally went longer. They therefore had to completely change the plot, and they had an all-male writer room do that. Surprise, surprise, the ending was bad.
Yeah.
It was horrible. They literally changed plot points because people guessed them, and they thought a surprising story that people couldn't guess was better than a good story.
Yeah.
So when the ending came, a lot of people were upset about this. There's this YouTube person called Lindsay Ellis that has a really great breakdown on it. And like she points out that a lot of people use Game of Thrones as an example of cancel culture, when really it was nothing of the sort. Twitter culture might have happened with some people in some circles, but a lot of people actually did vent their frustration at the people directly responsible for the bad thing.
Yeah,
the writers.
The writers. And they didn't...
Or the executives.
Yeah, they didn't misplace their criticism on the actors. In fact, the actors got amazing support after it ended.
Right.
People were still really fans of them because
a lot
they
of
recognized
people,
that the acting was really good. It was the writing that failed
them. A lot of
them.
people also felt the actors were betrayed.
Over. Yeah.
Right. They could have had several more seasons of that show with more pay and everything. There was no reason it had to prematurely end like that. So a lot of people were upset, but rightly so. And there are people I listen to on podcasts. Like I'm thinking specifically of that Culture Kings podcast we listened to. And they called it like cancel culture and whatnot. And I was kind of disappointed in them because I would have hoped that they would know better than that.
Yeah.
Because what they were was in a state of denial that what they had seen was just bad. So anyone criticizing it, they felt like it was like an attack, like how people speak of with cancel culture. And, we talk about how there is online harassment and whatnot, but calling a thing you like bad That's not online harassment. That's criticism. And for some people, that ruins it for them. And if you're upset about that, you're like, I don't want you to ruin it for me. Well, it doesn't have to. But now you're aware and you can choose to partake and still enjoy it, even if you're aware of the drawbacks. Mm-hmm. Like, again, with Culture Kings, for an example, one of them loves Disney, but is completely aware of Disney's faults. Yeah. So I'm okay with them loving Disney. You love Disney as much as you want. Just acknowledge their faults. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, maybe we should have a discussion about supporting them.
Yeah.
Anyway, the other example I wanted to talk about is this probably the most popular transgender YouTube person in the world. Mm-hmm. If not, she's up there. ContraPoints. Mm-hmm. Do you want to take over, or should I go?
No, you got this.
Okay, all right. Basically, she makes a lot of videos talking about basically the trans experience. And she goes at this from many different angles and talks about many different perspectives and criticizes basically all of them, some more than others, naturally. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, time after time after time, get mad at her for something. And a lot of the people that get mad at her are trans people. Because, I mean, anyone who's anti-trans is obviously just going to be mad at her the whole time, right? But there are a lot of trans people that get really upset when she says something offensive. Or she paints them in a way that they don't want to be painted. The thing is, there's a lot of infighting.
Yeah.
Like, a lot. Mm-hmm. And personally, I feel that the work she's doing is very great work and does a great insight into a world that most cis people, like me, like you, will never get to see personally, firsthand.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And because she goes into such a level of nuance, far beyond what anything Twitter would allow.
Yeah.
It means she might mess up.
Mm-hmm. And like, we're not saying she's never done anything wrong.
Right. I'm certain. I mean, it's honestly hard to find whenever she does mess up and people get mad at her. It's hard to actually find what they are mad about. I can tell you several times people got mad at her for something, and I could not, for the life of me, find out what exactly it was they were mad about. Because people didn't even know. A lot of people just kind of check out because they're like, well, I don't even know what's going on anymore. I don't want to get infighting in between my friends. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that is because there's a tendency that when someone like that says something wrong, to just cancel them entirely and not realize there's nuance to this. And I think she's actively trying to do good. And I don't know. You should apologize if you do something bad. But even then, you should also allow forgiveness and you should be willing to criticize bad things. I think she's a net good. And I guess that's basically all we have time to say. I wish I could go on more because we're near the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm Kyle.
I'm Kira.
Oh, wait, did you have anything you wanted to finish on?
No.
You good?
Yeah.
Really?
I'm good.
All right. So in conclusion, things complicated.
Yes, not thing bad, thing complicated.
Yes. And I guess ultimately make sure to direct your anger to people who actually deserve it, because sometimes that's all they're ever going to get, and allow forgiveness, enjoy content, criticize content. This is a multi-point conclusion. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, check our Twitter out, I guess, despite everything.
Yeah.
Gang theorems. Yeah.